Talk 580 1059 KMJ. Welcome to the Marc Kapetan Show. I'm attorney Marc Kapetan, your host. Today's show is brought to you by the Kapetan Brothers Law Firm, serving the Central Valley since 1995. If you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, a truck accident, or a motorcycle accident, give us a call at 559-498-8000. Or if you've been arrested or cited for a criminal offense, call us 559-498-8000. Kapetan Brothers, we are the Valley's law firm. You know, folks, on these shows, we typically talk with businessmen and lawyers and politicians. And, you know, sometimes it's just nice to have a chat with a dear old friend who I find to be a truly interesting person. I'm going to call him the Central Valley's most interesting man, Kenny Wagner.
Hi, Mark.
Kenny, how are you? Now, let me explain this. Kenny is a war correspondent, a private investigator, a fire chief, and has been my buddy for about 30 years now, right, Kenny?
That's about right.
Listen, let's get this out of the way, Kenny, and I hate to start off the show with this, but you're about 25 years older than I am. But you and I were the greatest of friends for a long, long time, riding motorcycles together, going to rock and roll shows together, et cetera, right, buddy?
I remember that last great show at the Wilson.
Which one was that?
Sam Kinison.
Oh, you know what? You're right. My brother John brought Sam Kinison to the Wilson. It was probably about a year before he died.
Yeah.
And I remember they said, John said he was sitting at the front before the show, and they were just sitting having a conversation, and he was just a really nice guy, as crazy as he was, you know. I didn't know you were at that show. Wow.
It's a great show. Remember we had the reserved Harley parking right in front.
Yes, we did. You had your Harley and I had mine. And in between trips to Pozo and God knows where, I mean, you took me on back roads. You took me on dirt roads on that Harley. We had a lot of fun, huh, Kenny?
A lot of fun. A lot of fun with our friend Ron.
Okay, we're going to talk something that's not quite so fun, and I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do because I pulled out something, and I'm going to hand it to you, and I have a copy myself, folks, and it is a newspaper article, and I'm going to do something that I've always wanted to do. Dateline, August 12th, 1972. Front page of the New York Times, the headline states, "The last American ground combat unit is deactivated in South Vietnam." You're a photojournalist, a war correspondent, you're working for UPI, and this is your story on the front page of the New York Times. Tell me about that day.
Well, it was an interesting day. It was the end of about a 5-day patrol out of our headquarters in Da Nang. And this picture depicts U.S. South Vietnamese infantry getting off of Huey's and American infantry getting on to go back. That was the last patrol by a U.S. combat unit.
Right. So basically, this is your picture, though, right? You took this picture.
I took this picture.
And you wrote this article.
And I dictated this article. It needed to be in right away. They couldn't wait for me to write it. So.
How did you dictate back then? What was that, Matt? What do you mean? Called it in, right?
Over a phone to Saigon, to the UPI offices in Saigon.
But you're in the middle of what? Are you out in the field, in the jungle?
No. After all these guys got picked up, I got picked up, and we went back to the Da Nang Air Base, where the 3rd Battalion of the 21st was headquartered.
Right.
And that's where everybody turned in all their ammunition, claymores, grenades, and that stuff. So
let me describe this for the audience, because basically there's a Huey on the ground. There's a bunch of Americans that are getting soldiers that are getting into the Huey, and there's a bunch of guys walking out into what's going to be the remaining of the remainder of the Vietnam War, but purely between North and South Vietnam. And these guys are going out and are either going to be, shot dead, or they're going to survive, or whatever it is. But America on this day is pulling out, and you're there.
It was just the combat unit,
right? But it was the end of basically the combat on the ground.
It was the end of U.S. combat units going out into the field on operations.
How did you get there?
Well, it was interesting. This was all from that Easter offensive by the North Vietnamese. That's where I sort of made my bones with UPI, had a couple good stories. Well, what happened is...
to Vietnam, how did you get there, basically?
In 1968, I was working for the California Division of Forestry, or Department of Forestry, which is now CAL FIRE. And I was growing a little disillusioned with my movement up the ranks.
Right.
And I started looking around for other things. And I was living in Oroville at the time, and I was dating a lot or seeing a lot of different women. And
that's the Kenny I know.
And some of them were engaged, and some of them had been married, and it was their boyfriends or ex-husbands or whatever were in Vietnam. And it kind of struck home one time when a friend of mine, the gal he was dating, her husband was killed. And I remember going over there and seeing the last letter that he wrote her.
Oh, wow.
Was not a letter. It was a piece of cardboard from a carton of C-rations that he just wrote, and you didn't need stamps.
Do you
and that's what she received. Her last thing she received from him was a letter written on the side of a C-ration box.
Do you remember what it said?
No.
But it made enough of an impression that you said, I need to go over there?
That's pretty much it. Of course, I grew up during World War II. I was too young for Korea, and I'd already done my military service with the Air National Guard.
Oh, so you did have military service. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, from 58 to 64 with the 194th Fighter Interceptor Squadron.
So at the time, you said you got over there around 69, I think. At the
January of 69.
At the time, the full anti-war protests were in full swing at that point, right?
Yes, they were.
Were you, and I know you're a much more liberal person now, but were you going over there to basically report on the war from the sense of these are our great American fighters over there doing this, or was it a sense of I need to explain what's really going on over there?
I went over to see what was happening.
Right.
I felt that I needed a war. I needed to actually experience one.
Really?
But I was working for the forestry as a fire prevention officer, a peace officer, and I was getting a little tired of getting woke up or put on alert because of intelligence saying that busloads of Black Panthers were coming up from Oakland and Richmond, and get your gun, get your gear together, and be prepared to rendezvous to protect state property.
As part of your service in the National Guard, or
No, this was with the forestry. I was a fire prevention officer.
Really? And they would call you up and tell you that?
Well, yeah, because we were peace officers. We had.
Oh, I didn't realize
we had, the guns, the badge, guns, handcuffs, the whole thing. I mean, it was probably the first stages of a real good fire prevention program that worked quite well while it was in effect, except when Reagan became governor, he wiped it out. And I went to Vietnam as a fire chief for a Defense Department contractor.
Right.
And when I was through with that contract, there wasn't anything to come back to. Because Reagan had wiped out the fire prevention program for the forestry.
And that's Kenny's first diss against Reagan for today. And we'll be right back with Kenny Wagner to tell how he got into Vietnam and that last day in Vietnam. We'll be right back after this. This is the Marc Kapetan Show. Talk 580 1059 KMJ. Welcome back to the Marc Kapetan Show. I'm attorney Marc Kapetan, your host. As always, the Marc Kapetan Show is brought to you by the Kapetan Brothers Law Firm, serving the Central Valley since 1995. If you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, a truck accident, or a motorcycle accident, give us a call at 559-498-8000. Or if you've been arrested or cited for a criminal offense, call us 559-498-8000. Kapetan Brothers, we are the Valley's law firm. And as always, like us on Facebook, right, Marcella?
Correct.
Marcella, my producer, says like us on Facebook. We are back on with Ken Wagner, a good old friend of mine and former war correspondent, private investigator. Kenny, you were telling me how you got into this last day of Vietnam. So go ahead and follow up. You were fire chief and you went over there, right?
I went over as a fire chief and did that for 3.5 years until they started, closing bases and shipping people home. Right. So there was no job for me back in California, so I just stayed on. And all the time I was a fire chief, I used to act as a tipster. I knew a lot of guys through my roommates in Saigon who had been doing journalism. Right. And so when everything was done, when I got laid off, they liked me for some reason, and the Easter offensive happened when the NVA came across the border and took over Quang Tri province with tanks and the whole works, and they just called me and said, "Wagner, get up there." Really? So I up to I-Corps.
And you had, and knowing that you were going to now be a war correspondent, or still part of your service as a fire chief?
No, I was completely done with the fire chief position. I was just sort of hanging out, and then I went to work for UPI. Right. They hired me on a day rate.
Give me that piece of paper before you keep on making noise with it, Kenny. I can't. You're driving me nuts.
Sorry.
Okay. So you're now working for UPI, and they tell you to get up because the Easter offensive is happening. I mean, are you scared, or does this fulfill your thoughts when you were home with the young lady who received the note from her now deceased?
Well, what had happened is, during the Nixon incursion into Cambodia in 1970, I had some vacation time, and a good friend of mine, Matt Frangiola, had been laid off from PA&E. So he made the suggestion, let's go over to Cambodia and see what's going on. Right. So we flew over to Phnom Penh, and of course we had our Nikons, and our notebooks and our Rolexes, so we were set to be war correspondents.
That's all you needed back then, right?
That's all you needed back then, a Nikon and a Rolex. Right. But we got into Phnom Penh. We made a few contacts there at the old Hotel Le Royale, and hitchhiked up to the front lines on a Pepsi truck. That's one, the film Killing Fields. Right. That's the one part of the film that is not accurate. Most of Asia is Coca-Cola. Okay. But Cambodia was Pepsi-Cola. So we hitchhiked on a Pepsi-Cola truck up to Komplan Chom, and then found our way to Tonlebet, where we hooked up with a group of Nungs, who are mercenaries, Chinese mercenaries that were with the 3rd Mobile Strike Force on these powered barges on the Mekong River. And we did that. And I had to get back to work because we were just there for about a week. Matt Frangiola, he stayed and got a bunch of pictures when he was with 2nd Battalion of the Vietnamese Marines, the Crazy Water Buffalo. That was that battalion. But anyway, he got me enthused about it. So when I had nothing more to do with the fire department, I started. That had
to have been an exciting life. I mean, you were in firefights and everything, right? As a war correspondent. guns being shot at you. You can nod your head all you want, Kenny, but this is radio. You actually have to say yes or no.
Yes, I've been shot at a few times.
Really?
Let's put it that way.
When you got there and you're doing this, is the excitement, because I mean it's just such an exciting job, is the excitement so much that you don't realize the danger, or you realize the danger and the excitement comes after when you've survived it?
When the adrenaline's there, you're just there doing it. You don't think about it because it's not going to be you. But you do think about it afterwards, because we were staying at the Lang Zang Hotel right there on the Perfume River in Hue, and every morning we'd get up early, have breakfast, and drive up as far as we could on Highway 1 till we got shot at, or till there was a roadblock or there was artillery, get a story, come back, write the story, send it off, go down to the bar, get drunk, and complain about why are we doing this? Why do we do this to ourselves? But that the next morning we'd get up and do it again. My
dad used to say when they would go flying missions in Vietnam that they would come back, they would get drunk, like you said, and they would cheer or toast each other. Here's to the next son of a bee that dies, basically. So it was serious stuff, followed by, usually a drunken night where they realize they've escaped death for one more time, and they go out the next day and they do it again.
That's exactly the way it was with us. Yeah.
Were you assigned to a group at the time where you had escorts that would go with you, or
No.
you're on your own?
In Vietnam, all you needed was your press card, and you went out and hustled your own rides and your own stuff, and you pretty much had free reign.
Wow!
As long as you had that press card and a gift of gab, and you found some people that liked you and would deal with you, you could go anywhere and do anything.
And no weapon, nothing that you carried, or would you actually carry a weapon?
The only time I ever carried a weapon was when I'd go out on patrol with a unit, and it was time for potty. So you'd leave your little night logger position or day logger position. You'd take a roll of toilet paper and an M16 and a shovel.
Really?
And you'd go out and dig yourself a little cat hole, but you always had to have that M16 with you.
And the soldiers would let you borrow it?
Yeah. They'd borrow one.
Oh, my God.
But I did carry a sidearm. Wasn't supposed to when I was a fire chief, when I was driving between Swan Lock and Saigon.
Oh, when you were a fire chief, though.
Yeah.
It was basically against an unwritten rule, or you think you would be put in more danger as a war correspondent if you carried a sidearm?
Well, we never thought of that. I never thought, but I did not carry one as a correspondent.
Right.
But as a fire chief, I did occasionally have a weapon with me.
How do you get to the point of this last day? This article in the New York Times.
Okay, well, I'd been up in I Corps, and I was working around Da Nang, staying at the Grand Hotel, and I got a tip that they'd picked up this young girl who used to sell ice cream outside the Marine base at Da Nang.
Right.
And they had her in custody because she was caught with a group of other villagers and some Viet Cong. What happened? So I went to interview her, and I wrote a story about how she had been home minding her own business when the VC came into the village and took all the young people and said, we're going out for some education, political education.
Right.
A little thing. Well, what it was is they dragooned these people to carry rockets into an area where they could fire the rockets into the base at Da Nang.
Right.
Well, one of the escorts, one of the VC's escorts, made the mistake of taking a shot at a helicopter that came real close to them.
Right.
And once he did that, they called in the gunships, and they raked him over pretty good. And this little girl survived by pulling the bodies of her friends that were killed or wounded on top of her. And that's how she was found when the South Vietnamese infantry went out and policed up the area. So I wrote this story
Yeah, hold that thought right now. We're going to go take another break, and I want to get right back to that story after this. This is the Marc Kapetan Show. We're on with war correspondent and private investigator Kenny Wagner. We'll be right back after this. This is KMJ. News Talk 580 1059 KMJ. Welcome back to the Marc Kapetan Show. I'm attorney Marc Kapetan, your host. As always, the Marc Kapetan Show is brought to you by the Kapetan Brothers Law Firm, serving the Central Valley since 1995. If you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, a truck accident, or a motorcycle accident, give us a call at 559-498-8000. Or if you've been arrested or cited for a criminal offense, call us 559-498-8000. Kapetan Brothers, we are the Valley's law firm. We're back on with Ken Wagner, war correspondent, private investigator, fire chief. Kenny, you were talking about this young Vietnamese girl who had now pulled the bodies over her to hide herself, and you were writing a story in Vietnam back in the day.
Right. So I wrote the story, and it was in the Stars and Stripes, and the colonel of the last battalion read it and kind of liked it, so he invited me to come over to his unit and meet some of the people. Right. And, of course, he was looking out for his troops, and I guess at the time he knew that they were going to be the last combat unit in Vietnam. So he liked my story, and I guess he liked me, but what cemented it for me is a little later, after I'd first met him, they had an artillery unit attached to them, and they provided the security for this artillery unit. Well, one of the troopers had gone outside the line to relieve himself.
Right.
And when he came back, he didn't come back the same way, and another guy thought it was an intruder and let loose with an M60 and stitched the guy pretty good. It didn't kill him, but messed him up pretty good. And I interviewed him, and I interviewed the shooter and did the whole thing. And then I had a epiphany. I said, what's the point of writing this story about this poor guy? Because he's going to be going home soon. And it really wasn't doing anything for me. If I'd have been a young cub reporter just starting out and wanting to get into the thing, I would have wrote the story, and it would have made a great story.
Right.
But I chose not to write it because
out of fear of maybe harming his family emotionally back home, or was it something inside that you felt?
That was it. I didn't want his folks to have that unit, that stigma
of friendly
fire. Exactly.
No kidding.
And the colonel appreciated that. So when they got the orders for the last patrol, he called me and said, be here at such and such a time in the morning, prepared to go, and prepared to go out into the field.
Yeah.
So I did, and when I got there were no other reporters. He gave that exclusivity to me.
No kidding.
Because of...
Let me ask you. So this was your story in the New York Times back in August 12th, 1972, of the last American ground combat units in South Vietnam, given to you as a gift by this colonel for what he thought was a noble deed on your part. Was it, number one, your last story in Vietnam? And was it, if it was it your last story partially because you felt that by not telling the story of the friendly fire, that maybe being a journalist wasn't for you?
Well, no, it wasn't. All my life I've done things that I enjoy doing.
Right.
and I've never really stuck with anything too long, except the fire service. I've always liked the fire service, but
well, that sort of is a nice sort of segue into the question that I have next, which was supposed to be part 2 of our show, and I call it the dichotomy of Kenny. And I was born on the East Coast, and so you finally came back from Vietnam in 1974, right? And you started your civilian life back home. And I call it the dichotomy of Kenny Wagner, because California, when I lived on the East Coast, was like a foreign world to us. And I've always found you as like a freewheeler, a nonconformist, a nonpartisan, an independent, a libertine, basically, an individualist. And I wondered where it came from, because you had this sort of background from Fresno, that you were a conservative in the sense that you were working for the Forestry Service and you were part of law enforcement as far as that was concerned. But then all of a sudden you have this very liberal side to you. Where's that come from?
Where's that come from?
Yeah, was it from mom and dad? Was it from your experience in Vietnam? What did mom and dad do?
Oh, my dad was a truck driver.
Yeah.
Initially, and then he went to work for the city of Fresno,
right,
in the disposal department.
And I understand you worked when you were a kid picking grapes, out
on the family farm.
Right.
I mean, it was my maternal grandparents had 20 acres or 40 acres of Thompsons down on Cherry Avenue,
right,
south of Easton.
So, I mean, you came from a conservative background in a conservative area of California, the Central Valley, and but yet you still have this very almost, I would say, the true Californian. What I've always loved. It's socially slightly liberal, fiscally conservative, and I'm trying to figure out where the makeup of Kenny Wagner came from.
It all came from reggae music. Reggae festivals. That's what I live for.
Oh my God! You took what I thought was just a hugely psychological, in-depth look inside your brain, and you basically said Pato Banton and Bob Marley made up my whole life. All right, let me ask you that. Is it something that you got into reggae early on because you wanted a freer life as far as that was concerned, or were you always, as a kid, were you always this way?
You could take a look at my confirmation picture from Free Evangelical Lutheran Cross Church.
Okay.
There's about 40 people in this confirmation class. Probably 25 guys and 15 women. And you look at everybody, all the women are wearing dresses and all the men are wearing suits or sport coats. Everybody is wearing a conventional four-in-hand tie. One guy has a bow tie. Guess who that was?
You had the bow tie, huh?
And I
was it a Paisley bow tie? No, that'd be before Paisley, huh? Long before Paisley, I hate to tell you.
Long before Paisley. No, I guess, that church, Reverend Meyer, was, we had services in German and English.
Yeah.
But I think most of the church were all Democrats.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because I just remember, the sermon after August 8th or August 11th of 45, when Reverend Meyer called or said that Harry Truman was probably the bravest man living that, ordered the atomic bomb.
Because he ordered the atomic. And see, that's what's interesting, and I wanted to talk to you, obviously, because you have a few years on me, Kenny, but I keep on trying to struggle to find the original true Californian, which to me had that sense of, we have a conservative side where we love America. We would do anything for it. Even as much as drop an atomic bomb. But they still had that socially liberal side also. You think that's gone these days?
I'd say so. Well, I don't know. These community food banks are doing, and it's usually through churches and stuff is where they get them. And I think it's happening again. I mean, it's people are sharing,
right?
And I don't know. Growing up during the war, there was rationing.
Right.
And growing up with parents that had been through the Depression, you learned lessons about using things and using things up and sharing and saving.
And that's your fiscal conservatism, basically. That's your conservative side, is that you realize that nothing is for free. You can't have anything that you want, that you do have to have some sort of responsibility in that regard.
Yes.
That was your answer?
That was
yes.
my answer, yes.
Thank you. I think I pushed you a little too far on that one, Kenny. We are on with you're killing me, Kenny. We are on with my very, very good friend, Kenny Wagner, war correspondent and private investigator. We'll be right back after this. This is the Marc Kapetan Show on KMJ. News Talk 580 1059 KMJ. Welcome back to the Marc Kapetan Show. This is attorney Marc Kapetan. As always, the show is brought to you by the Kapetan Brothers Law Firm, serving the Central Valley since 1995. If you or anybody you know has been injured in an auto accident, a truck accident, or a motorcycle accident, give us a call at 559-498-8000. Or if you've been arrested or cited for a criminal offense, call us 559-498-8000. Kapetan Brothers, we are the Valley's law firm. We are back on with former war correspondent, fire chief here in Fresno Cal Fire, and also private investigator Ken Wagner, who just admitted over the break that you started off as a Republican. All right, Kenny? You don't want to admit that to your friends out there? Kenny, you were go ahead. You want to explain that at all?
I was just registered as a Republican for a very short time.
Okay, I had to out you that way, Kenny. Listen, Kenny, let's talk. We were talking about where you've become more of a freer soul, and whether it was built into you or whether it was the reggae music that started it. You are part of the Burning Man Fire Department. What is it?
The Emergency Services Department at Burning Man.
And Burning Man's the big concert and an event that occurs where every year?
Every year out on the Black Rock Desert.
Black Rock. Did they do it this year?
They did not do it this year.
Right. Yeah.
It was canceled.
How did you become part of the fire department for the Burning Man?
Well, I bought this coffee table book, and I had it on my coffee table.
Right.
And Ron Saul came by.
Attorney
evening.
Ron Saul, who I used to work for back in the day.
And he was looking through it, and he liked what he saw.
Right.
The hot springs, nudity, and so he
Sorry, Ron.
He did some research and said, we could become Black Rock Rangers, and this is their non-confrontational security that Burning Man has, just to solve disputes between people at the festival.
Right.
And they had Blue Dot Rangers, Red Dot Rangers, and Green Dot Rangers.
Okay.
Red Dot Rangers were fire people. Blue Dot were medical. Green Dot were mental health.
And obviously, because of your fire background in firefighting,
I went and I was accepted as a Red Dot Ranger.
You actually built with Ron, and Ron had built these little Land Rovers, basically, that were fire engines, right?
We went the first year. 2001 was our first year, and we decided then that we needed to get our own little art cars.
Right.
Because you're not allowed to drive vehicles around Burning Man unless they're an art car or a music thing or whatever. So we said, we need to have our own little vehicles. And he said, they've got these things, these Kawasaki mules that would be perfect.
Right.
And I said, well, let's make them practical. Let's make 2 baby fire trucks. So that's what we did. So I put in an Air Quick reversed engineered an air quick system to fit inside the back of the mule.
And was that to put out fires, you're basically saying?
100 gallons of water. There, you could actually call them a Type 7 wildland engine. They don't have all the tools and stuff, but they have the water and hand tools and reel line. And
you learned all this because of your fire background, right?
Fire background.
I mean, I love hearing you talk with that lingo because I've never heard you be so technical before. Okay, so you build these fire engines, and believe me, between you and me, we all know this is just so you could go see a free show at Burning Man, right?
That's right. That's right.
And see all the music because
when you work as a ranger, you get your ticket free,
right?
Yeah. But then Burning Man changed. They went from the Rangers. They kept the Rangers, but they saw that they needed more in the way of medical and fire, communications, and mental health.
I mean, did you ever put out fires there at Burning Man?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Most of the fires at Burning Man are caused by leaking propane tanks in RVs.
Don't tell me that, Kenny. You know what it's caused by is by people lighting up, right?
Not really.
No, really.
Not really. No, there's very, very few accidental fires like that.
It's a small city, right? 50,000 or more?
Last year was close to 80,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. When Ron and I first started going back in 2001, it was about 35,000.
Really?
And it became quite a thing. It used to be run by 5 people. It was an LLC, and now it's become a nonprofit, which allows them to accept donations. I remember the first year that we had the emergency services department, Lagunitas, the brewery out of Petaluma, gave the fire department 10 kegs of beer. It was very nice. It was a good year.
Great. That's all I needed to hear. But I mean, all joking aside, you guys were a very, very important part of protecting the safety of the people there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially the emergency service department is fire, medical, communications, and mental health or I forget what they call it exactly.
There happened to be, however, one young lady that you couldn't quite protect her as best as you could. Explain when they actually light up the Burning Man, what the process is, and what happened one year.
Every year on Saturday is when they burn the man. When they burn the man on Saturday, they have a big perimeter, an outside perimeter, to keep people back.
Right.
So after the man burns and it falls and there's no hazard of anything falling or rolling out of the fire, they allow the spectators to come to the fire. And just for some reason, they get there and they just start going counterclockwise. Just like you've seen pictures of the faithful at Mecca, right? Same thing, except they're going around the fire, and we're out there watching the fire and watching people, and we're wearing our full turnout gear: boots, pants, coat, bunker coat, helmet, face shroud, everything.
But you're talking about the silver outfits, or just your firefighters?
Just the regular fire. Right. We do have silver suits, but they don't stop people.
And the temperatures are just extreme temperatures.
When you're standing near the fire, you have to keep turning like you're on a rotisserie.
Oh,
because if you stand there too long, you'll get baked, and you back off. And every year the fire is different.
Right.
Well, I learned real early to keep people away from you, because I had been standing next to this fire, and my turnout coats have these external metal buckles that snap, the D-ring snap. And I was standing there, and this very young sparkle pony, that's what we call the cute girls that dress up or undress and dance around. But this little sparkle pony came running up to me. "Oh, Mr. Fireman, thank you." And she leaped onto me and just got me in the chest and backed off immediately, because I tried to keep her away, But there she was. She was branded by the buckles on my turnout.
On her naked body, basically.
On her naked body.
Oh, my God.
From clavicle to whatever.
The hazards of firefighting. Kenny, you are now an octogenarian, which I never would have believed. And so what's the future for you, Kenny? You're going to be working with CAL FIRE still?
I certainly hope so.
You're-
I've got applications in for different positions and hope to work for again next year.
You've been working up in the Shaver area the past couple of years, and now...
Well, just in 2019, I worked in Fresno County. In 16 and 17, I was working up in Plumas County,
With about-
in little town of Quincy.
With about 30 seconds to go, is there anything that you think that could have helped prevent these fires up in Shaver?
That's a
discussion
you could
for another
prevent
time?
it by it not starting.
Yeah.
So what contributed most to that fire was the fact of the beetle-killed trees.
Yeah. It sounds like a discussion for another time, Kenny. This has been Kenny Wagner, one of my favorite guys in the whole world. What did I call you? The Central Valley's most interesting man, former war correspondent, private investigator, fire chief. We had plenty we could have talked about. I wish we'd had more time. Kenny, I appreciate being on the show.
Mark, it's been a pleasure. Enjoy it.
We'll see you next week on the Marc Kapetan Show. This is KMJ.